I don't mean to be preempting anybody in this place, but because I don't know if I'll be on my feet in this place tomorrow, I do want to just say something quickly. Tomorrow is October 22nd, and it was 10 years ago tomorrow that myself and a handful of people who still remain in this place had the unfortunate scenario of being locked down in this House of Commons. I was in the reading room in the Conservative caucus with Prime Minister Stephen Harper when a gun...
Are they still waiting for the documents before they get back to work? So we don't have answers about that. Yeah, they're still waiting for the documents. Technically, the government's still in like a soft freeze.
While I'm on my
they can get certain things done, but it hasn't resumed back to normal.
Vincent, the warrant officer, was killed a few days earlier, to the family of Nathan Cirillo. And I just wanted to say thank you very much to the continued work of our Parliamentary Protective Services. It wasn't that way then. As a matter of fact, the current contingent was reorganized after that incident. But I wanted to throw out a thank you to J.J. Frankie, who was the security guard who was in our caucus room that day, and of course Constable Son, who actually took a bullet that day. And I want to thank
fuck that terrorist that killed Nathan Cirillo. Go to hell.
As a hunter, Mr. Speaker, I knew exactly what I heard outside the doors of that caucus room. And I could say,
I know people that were there.
I don't remember in 19 years, almost 19 years of doing this job, I don't remember every single day, but I remember that day. So now I'll move on, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak on a motion of privilege put forward by my Conservative colleague following the government's refusal to hand over all documents.
Yeah, that stained this country, man. That was horrible what happened.
To the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. In my 18 plus years as a parliamentarian in this House, I've understood that breaches of privilege of parliamentarians is a serious matter. However, it seems that this current Liberal government does not share that same understanding. The Liberal government has ignored the will of Parliament and Canadians once again. But let's go back and summarize this latest act of corruption by the Liberal government with a quick review of the timeline. In late 2018, the former industry minister expressed concerns regarding the chair of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, given that he had been publicly criticizing government legislation at the time. The then minister's office requested that the chair stop criticizing his government's legislation. The minister at the time, the Prime Minister's office and Privy Council office were warned of the risks associated with their desire to replace the chair with a proposed candidate who was receiving Sustainable Development Technology Canada funding through one of their companies, which was a clear conflict of interest. In June 2019, the minister decided to proceed with the appointment of a conflicted chair, despite repeated warnings expressed to the minister's office. The new chair created an environment where conflict of interests are tolerated and managed by board members. Board members then went on to award Sustainable Development Technology Canada funding to companies in which they themselves hold stock or high-level positions within the companies that received the funding. 2 additional appointed and controversial board members engaged in unethical behavior in breach of the Conflict of Interest Act by approving funding to companies in which they hold ownership stakes. Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada officials witnessed 186 conflicts at the board, but did not intervene. In November of 2022, whistleblowers raised internal concerns with the Auditor General about unethical practices at Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Matthew Galligan with the $2.
Was briefed by the
I have a million gray hairs. You're still young. I appreciate it. Thank you.
In September of 2023, the whistleblowers take the allegations public, and the minister agrees to suspend Sustainable Development Technology Canada funding. In November of 2023, the Auditor General announces an audit of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. In June of 2024, the Auditor General report is released finding severe governance failures at Sustainable Development Technology Canada. And that brings us to where we are here today. On June 10th, this House adopted a motion calling for the production of various documents related to Sustainable Development Technology Canada to be turned over to the RCMP for review. It was passed by a majority of members in this House. In response to the motion adopted, departments either outright refused this House's order The redacted documents were turned over citing provisions of the Privacy Act or Access to Information Act in direct violation of the order that was voted on by a majority of members of this House. Nothing in that House order required redactions. The House enjoys the absolute, this House enjoys the absolute and unfettered power to order the production of documents that is not limited by any statute. These powers are rooted in the Constitution Act of 1867 and the Parliament of Canada Act. In response to the failure to produce documents, my colleague, the Conservative House Leader, raised a point of privilege, arguing that House privilege has been breached due to the failure to comply with the House's direct order. On September 26th, the ruling on this point of privilege was found that the privilege of the House had indeed been breached, and the Conservatives have been fighting for the will of Canadians and to uphold the powers of this House in this debate ever since. The whistleblower for Sustainable Development Technology Canada stated, and here's where I'm quoting, "I think the Auditor General's investigation was more of a cursory review. I don't think the goal and mandate of the Auditor General's office is to actually look into criminality. I'm not surprised by the fact that they haven't found anything criminal because they're not looking for intent. If their investigation was focused on intent, of course they would find the criminality." And I'll go on with the quote from the whistleblower, Mr. Speaker. "I know the federal government, like the minister, has continued saying that there was no criminal intent and nothing was found, but I think the committee would agree that they're not to be trusted on this situation. I would happily agree to whatever the findings are by the RCMP. I would say that I wouldn't trust that there isn't criminality unless the RCMP is given full authority to investigate." Full authority, which means they have to have all of the facts, not just the facts that the government chooses to release in direct contravention of an order passed by this House. So it is high time, Mr. Speaker, for the government to hand over the documents to the RCMP, for the RCMP themselves to determine the criminal activity in the Green Slush Fund scandal. The whistleblower continued by stating, "I am confident that the Auditor General would confirm the financial mismanagement at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and I remain equally confident that the RCMP will substantiate the criminal activities that occurred within the organization. The true failure of the situation stands at the feet of our current government, whose decision to protect wrongdoers and cover up their findings over the last 12 months is a serious indictment of how our democratic systems and institutions are being corrupted by political interference. It should never have taken 2 years for the issues to reach this point, and what should have been a straightforward process turned into a bureaucratic nightmare that allowed Sustainable Development Technology Canada to continue wasting millions of dollars and abusing countless employees over the last year." Conservatives know that the current government remains more concerned about their own insiders and friends and ministers than the issues that are facing ordinary, everyday Canadians. I couldn't have said it better myself when the whistleblower for this massive government overreach said, "I think that the current government is more interested in protecting themselves and protecting the situation being a public nightmare, and they would rather protect wrongdoers and financial mismanagement than have to deal with a situation like this Sustainable Development Technology Canada and in the public sphere." It has become abundantly clear, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years that this NDP Liberal government are not worth the cost, not worth the crime, not worth the corruption, and the Green Slush Fund scandal is just another scandal on the heap pile of the festering corruption of 9 years of this government. My Conservative colleagues and I prioritize the concept of responsible government in Canada. The government must answer to members as the representatives of the people and must be held accountable to Canadians who are suffering from the failed policies, actions, and inflationary spending of this government. In 2015, this Prime Minister set his core principles of open and accountable government as a central tenet of his office and the role of Cabinet. For years, the actions of this Liberal government have broken promises for this motto and now has failed to explain to Canadians where $400 million taxpayer dollars have gone under the Green Slush Fund. And just to refresh everybody's memory, the scandal, the $40 million that was through ad scam is 1/10 of what just this particular scandal alone is.
Oh my God.
The minister's own statement in Open and Accountable Government states, creating the culture of integrity and accountability.
That's so much money, man.
Canadians will require constant attention and ongoing commitment by all of us throughout our mandate. This guide will serve as an important reference as we strive to provide an open and accountable government for all Canadians. Well, how has that turned out, Mr. Speaker? Broken promises, corruption, and scandal are now known by millions of Canadians as the core principles and tenets of this Liberal government and their Prime Minister, rather than their so-called open and accountable government document. You'll notice, Mr. Speaker, they never refer to it anymore. Mr. Speaker, you have ruled that the NDP Liberal government has violated a House order to turn over evidence to the police for a criminal investigation in this scandal. It is time for some accountability, and it is time to show Canadians where their tax dollars are really going. The Auditor General's findings reveal that Liberal appointees have paid $400 million to their own companies, involving not 1, not 2, not 10, not 50, not 100.
Come on.
But 186 conflicts of interest.
What?
Canada is struggling. This country feels broken under the leadership of this Prime Minister and his NDP Liberal government. Canadian families.
What the hell's going on with Canada, man?
This year at the grocery store and food banks have seen a 50% rise in visits since 2021. 2 million Canadians a month visiting food banks. Life has never been less affordable, more expensive. At a time when Canadians are struggling with an impossible cost of living, the Liberal government continues to spend recklessly, funneling taxpayer dollars to their friends and their insiders. To summarize the facts and this serious breach of privilege, Sustainable Development Technology Canada was established in 2001 by the
186 conflicts of interest.
Foundation for Sustainable Development Technology Act to fund the development and demonstration of new technologies that promote sustainable development. Sustainable Development Technology Canada is responsible for the administration.
Listing all the scandals and conflicts of interest is so long that he needs to take a drink of water.
Science and Economic Development Canada.
This is crazy.
In 2019, the former industry minister began appointing conflicted executives to the board of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. The board appointed by this Liberal government began voting companies in which executives hold active conflicts of interest. The Auditor General and Ethics Commissioner initiated separate investigations after whistleblowers came forward with allegations of financial mismanagement of the fund. The Auditor General's investigation finds severe gaps in governance standards and uncovers that $400 million in Sustainable Development Technology Canada funding was awarded to projects in which board members, the ones making the decisions of the awards, were conflicted during the 5-year audit period. The government has opposed the opposition at every step of the way in getting these documents, trying to silence the will of parliamentarians in this House and avoid accountability to Canadians. The Liberals are trying to hide the $390 million that has gone to Liberal insiders under this program. They continue to oppose this production order for important documents to be turned over to the RCMP. The Prime Minister's personal department, the Privy Council Office, defied the order of the House to produce these documents and ordered departments to redact all sensitive information. The Prime Minister's office turned its back on Canadians by blacking out these documents, and Canadians want to know, what exactly is this government hiding? Under the leadership of this Prime Minister, Canada is facing corruption like we have never seen in my 18 years in this House. Conservatives have asked for these documents to hold this government to account. My voters in the riding of Red Deer-Lacombe have had enough and want answers. The government needs to answer for their corrupt actions and release these documents. The Liberal government is resisting and hiding these documents because they know there is corruption that is yet to be revealed. If this were a private sector company, Mr. Speaker, we would be turning, or that company would be turning those documents over to police for immediate investigation. It's our job, not the job of police, to seek with the courts. It is our job to expose the corruption in the things we have authorized money for in this Parliament. It's our job, and it's time that the Liberal minister and this Prime Minister started caring about it. The Auditor General found that Sustainable Development Technology Canada gave $58 million to 10 ineligible projects that on occasions couldn't demonstrate an environment of green technology. $58 million for projects, 10 projects that had nothing to do with the mandate of the organization. $334 million over 186 different cases to projects in which board members, 186 conflicts of interest, in which board members,
186.
just a handful of board members, managed to wind up in 186 conflicts of interest.
Isn't that insane?
Like, you can't make this stuff up. $58 million to projects without ensuring contribution agreement terms were met. So in other words, where there was matching funds expected, normally you would do due diligence and make sure before you release any taxpayers' funds that the matching funding would come. But there was no requirement for the matching funding to come, so we'll just send out another $60 million. Who cares? It's just another liberal rich day for liberal insiders. Even the Prime Minister's own government departments know that the Liberal government is not worth the corruption or the cost. A recording of a senior civil servant revealed the outright incompetence of this government, which gave $123 million worth of contracts inappropriately. The blame for this scandal lies clearly with the Prime Minister and his ministers of industry who did not sufficiently monitor the contracts which were given to Liberal friends and insiders. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, just today, you tabled a further update from the legal clerk on the responses to the June 10th production order concerning Sustainable Development Technology Canada. It would not come as a surprise to anyone in this place that these documents from the Departments of Finance, Industry, and the Treasury Board Secretariat were heavily redacted or had pages withheld in their entirety. Surprise, surprise, the Liberal government, even in the context of this debate, in this place, is withholding information from Canadian taxpayers.
Wow.
This privilege ruling and the actions of the NDP Liberal government has already paralyzed this Parliament and made it impossible to address the serious issues facing Canadians, such as doubling housing costs, food inflation, crime, and chaos. And I'll just remind the viewers at home, this is not the first time that we've actually been in this scenario. And Mr. Speaker, I hope you've got good legal counsel, because the precedence has already been set that in the event that this House is adjourned, you could be facing legal consequences, because the last Speaker tried to produce documents in the Winnipeg lab scandal, just another one of the scandals too numerous to mention, and the government was actually going to take the Speaker to court in order to
Holy crap.
Their accountability and their actions or lack thereof when it came to protecting Canada's sovereignty in the Winnipeg Labs scandal. Such is the lengths.
You just threatened the House Speaker.
Well, I've got news for them, Mr. Speaker. The lengths that Conservatives will go to in order to hold the government to account and to make sure that taxpayers are adequately informed about where their hard-earned dollars are going, is that we will continue this debate until the result that Canadians deserve and that Canadians expect is produced, which is the full documents, unredacted, disclosed here in this Parliament and turned over to the RCMP so that we can pursue any criminality, if necessary, within Sustainable Development Technology Canada. And it's time for this Prime Minister to take accountability, provide these documents outlining the conflicts of interest of this green slush fund. Only common sense Conservatives will end the corruption and get answers that Canadians rightfully deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow, folks.
Questions and comments.
Put some W's down in the chat for that. He just threatened the House Speaker, saying, I hope you got some good legal counsel, because last time the House Speaker tried to pull this stuff, he got his ass served to him. So, of course, he's referring to Greg Fergus, not this House Speaker here. You always have to address the chair, right? That's awesome, man. That is incredible. Good for them.